So I'm Abhimanyu Ghoshal. I'm a reporter with The Next Web, and this is my second time in Amsterdam, my second time at the TNW Conference, and it certainly got bigger, better, and more diverse with each time. And I think, case in point is my guest who's here today. I would say he's tackling a very different sort of problem than most of the companies, the very talented companies and individuals who are presenting here today. So, how many of you know Quora, the Q&A platform online? Yeah? So last year, my favorite thread on the site was when someone asked the question, how can I be as great as Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, or Sir Richard Branson? So at that point, Elon Musk's ex-wife, Justine, actually dropped by to reply. So what she was saying is that she talked about having a vastly different way of thinking and approaching problems differently. But she also had a very important idea. She said, follow your obsessions until a problem starts to emerge, a big, meaty, challenging problem that impacts as many people as possible, until you feel hell-bent to solve or die trying to solve that problem. So I believe we have such an individual in our midst today. And we're talking about how to solve big sustainability problems. But just before we dive in, I think a little video clip that we'll play now will just get you more into the scheme of things.
The plastic pollution problem has always been portrayed as something that is unsolvable. The story has always been, okay, we can't clean it up, so the best thing we can do is not make it worse. To me, that's a very uninspiring message.
He has devised the first real plan to try to clean things up.
What we're doing here now, it has never been done before.
He wants to build the largest floating barrier ever deployed.
What I really hope is that the ocean cleanup in this century can be a symbol for us using technology to actually make things better.
Right on. So I'm here with, I think many of you recognize Boyan Slat. He is the founder and CEO of the Ocean Cleanup Project, and that's an initiative to develop technologies to extract and intercept and prevent plastic pollution in the world's largest water bodies. So it follows a unique approach to this global issue. And it's led by an innovator who is named in Forbes 30 Under 30 list for 2016. And what's interesting is this solution that he's working on is estimated to be nearly 8,000 times faster and about 33 times cheaper than conventional methods. And again, the other interesting thing is Boyan, who's leading or taking on this incredible journey, is just 21 years old. So, hi, Boyan.
Hi there.
How's it going? So, we saw a little clip, but I think it would be great if you could just take us through the challenge of plastic pollution that you're dealing with in the oceans, and what is the sort of impact we're looking at, and give us an overview of how your project works.
Sure. Yeah. So, every week, about 8 million. So the volume of about 2 Empire State Buildings worth of plastic flows into the oceans, and there are really 3 problems with that. First of all, it damages ecosystems. There are about 100 species which currently go extinct or can go extinct because of plastic pollution. The second issue is that these big objects, they crumble down into the smaller pieces, and then it enters the food chain, and that also has potential health effects to us humans. And then thirdly, there's obvious economic challenge as well. So think about the fishing, the shipping industry, tourism. So UN says it's about $13 billion a year, that damage. Right. So it's certainly cheaper to clean up than to leave in the oceans, I think. Sure. So instead of going after the plastic using boats and nets to try and fish for plastic, which would take about 79,000 years, so wouldn't be such a great idea, I think. And would also cost many tens of billions of dollars. We wondered, well, why would you go through the oceans if the oceans can also go through you? So we came up with this passive system that is attached to the seabed and basically allows the ocean currents to let the ocean clean itself. So, it's a passive system, so it's attached to the seabed, doesn't move, while the ocean currents, they move around. And now we've indeed been able to show that with a single one of those systems deployed for 10 years, we can clean up about half the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Yeah.
Right on. And at this point, I would say, the challenge of cleaning up, the world's biggest water bodies, I would say would be daunting to anyone in this room. So how do you get in the right frame of mind to think about solving a big problem like that? Do you start by saying, okay, this is the scale of the issue, let's look at tackling it, or do you start small? So what do you think is the best way to look at it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I've not been successful yet, in my opinion. I mean, the ocean is still polluted. We haven't started the cleanup yet, so I'm not sure if I would be the right person to ask. But I think that's really the point. I mean, I don't yet know whether we can do this or whether we will succeed. But considering the scale of the problem, I thought it was important to at least try.
Right.
So that's what I also did a few years ago. I was 16 years old, diving in Greece, came across more plastic bags than fish, and I thought, well, why don't we clean this up? And quickly realized that the ocean is quite big. So then came up with this idea. And now looking back at a few years ago, I really didn't have a bloody clue what I was doing, to be honest, really. But I just gave it a go and tried to always look for a way in which I could make things work, and we continue to do so until this day.
Wow. I guess then, the great unknown is probably less of an enemy than we might believe. And so can you tell me about, what are some factors that you believe that are important to growing your project, to a large scale? When you say you started from a basic idea at 16, how do you grow it to the scale now where you have, let's say, is it more than 100 people with employees and volunteers working with the Ocean Cleanup Project?
Yeah, I think right now we have about 45 people on staff, and yeah, indeed, that's such a number in volunteers. So,
right.
Yeah. How do you do that? Well, I think one of the important things is to work on a problem which is actually a real problem. I think there are a lot of incredibly smart people these days that work on things which may have a potential big personal gain, but will be forgotten in 10 years. It's not really useful, I would say. So I think that once you work on something that's useful, even though it may be a very big problem, you will find people who will want to be part of this. And this is not something which I do alone. It's thanks to these hundreds of thousands of people who have supported us in terms of funding, in terms of supplying, spreading the word, etc., which brings us to success, I think. And so I think it really helps to work on something that matters.
Right. And would you say that you're constantly looking for like-minded people, when you're considering who to join, who to work with on your team?
Well, you do need people who are slightly crazy in a way, because I think that's pretty important. And yeah, basically, you must, for anything that you want, the entrepreneurship is a constant list of solving problems, right?
Right.
And to solve any problem, there are always 100 different ways in which you can do so, and you don't need people who look at all these different options and say, look, the majority of it, or I only see things in which, how we can make it work, so ergo it doesn't work. You really need these people who obsessively look for that one way in which you can make it work. And yeah, and that's the type of people that we try to hire.
So it's that crazy streak that you know is essential to solving this sort of a problem.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't mean it certainly doesn't mean experience.
Yeah.
I think our average age is pretty low. It's like 32 or so.
You're bringing down the average a great deal.
Maybe, yeah. Well, but sometimes it appears like there is an inverse correlation between experience and open-mindedness or creativity.
Right.
So I think we do need a sort of a good balance there. Yeah.
Right on. And also, let's talk about the project a little bit. I know that you're slated to start a pilot test program next month. So can you tell us a little about that, as well as the funding that you've recently secured, and how that whole thing is panning out?
Yeah. So the way we develop this technology is very iterative. You don't just build an aircraft in one go. So I think it's very, very similar. So last year we did a lot of these scale model tests, which I think we also saw in the video. And the next major step is to deploy a 100-meter long prototype off the coast of the Netherlands. It will be indeed unveiled in less than a month in Scheveningen. So try pronouncing that. It's a very nice city.
I leave that to you.
Yeah. So that will be the next step. It will be out there for a year, and really, I mean, the conditions in the North Sea are so severe that if it would survive the first minor storm in September, perhaps, it will have forces that are higher than a 100-year storm in the Pacific Ocean. So we can pretty much say if it survives here, it will survive anywhere. So it's a good test.
Yeah.
And if that goes well, by mid-next year, we should have the first operational pilot. So the first time we'll actually be collecting vast amounts of plastic from the ocean.
Right.
And that should put us on track to launch the largest cleanup in history by 2020, I think.
Fantastic. And what happens to the plastic once it's collected by the barriers?
So once it's concentrated, because really the problem is, even though there is a lot of plastic, it's spread out over a very large area. So you have to first concentrate it before you can easily take it out of the ocean.
Yeah.
So that's why we use these extremely long, we call them sort of artificial coastlines, so these floating barriers. But once it's concentrated, you could probably walk on the water, and that's the spot where we can then easily take it out, and we use a combination of pumping systems as well as conveyor systems to do so.
Right. And okay, so this is it's a tricky one. Like similarly large initiatives, the Ocean Cleanup Project faces criticism, which I understand that you welcome, right? And you get all kinds of feedback. You've had oceanographers actually look at the project initially, as well as the feasibility study that you released later on. And they brought up issues like an underestimation of weather conditions, negative impact on environmental life, in the waters, and even potentially fishing at the wrong spot for plastic. So, can you tell us specifically how you're addressing these three issues, and even in general, like if you had a large entrepreneurial project, what's the right attitude to have when it comes to feedback like this?
Sure. So perhaps first, in general, I think that whenever you're trying to do something new, there will always be people who say that it can't be done, of course. You could look at that two ways, but the way we look at it is say, well, okay, so there's there's good criticism and there's bad criticism, and
Right.
with the good criticism, you should be extremely happy, and it actually helps us look for the right questions to answer. And then there is also less useful criticism, which you really shouldn't do anything with, I think. So, and what were the three specific points again?
So one is potentially fishing in the wrong spot for plastic,
Yep.
and a negative impact on on marine life, and also underestimating the weather conditions, and
Right.
seeing if the barrier can actually handle those sort of situations.
Sure. Right now, so starting with the forces one.
Yep.
So we're actually, I think Europe is a bit like the Silicon Valley of the offshore industry. So we have this very high concentration of offshore companies here. And so we're working together with the companies like Herema, SBM Offshore, who've developed world's largest offshore structures before and world's deepest offshore structures.
Okay.
Actually with the testing, what it now turns out that these barriers, they actually cancel each other out. So the forces turned out to be about an order of magnitude lower than we expected them to be.
Okay.
So that's actually a very important fundamental thing to understand, that we're not trying to stop the ocean or something.
Yeah.
We're actually moving with it, and that way the forces, the force is actually manageable.
Right.
In terms of sea life, so we actually just finished the environmental impact study, specific for the North Sea. A company called Haskoning did that for us, and they say the impact is negligible. So obviously we continue to monitor it while we're testing.
Right.
We have this precautionary approach, but right now, because the current flows underneath these barriers, we don't use any nets. We don't expect there to be any major surprises.
Sure.
And then the fishing at the wrong spot. Well, where the plastic concentrates, it's determined by the currents.
Okay.
So we are I think pretty much we have the most advanced computer model to model where the plastic is right now. And now we're combining that computer model together with the measurements we did during the mega expedition last year. So we crossed the area with 30 vessels at the same time, producing the first high-resolution map of the garbage patch. Probably results will be published around the end of the year. I'm pretty certain we were fishing at the right spot.
Right on. I also want to know about, what are some lessons that people can learn about, both protecting the environment as well as, growing and sustaining a long-term project like this. This is going to take years, right? So how do you stay in the game? How do you stay as strong as when you first started with an innovative idea? Both specifically with the Ocean Cleanup Project and, for entrepreneurs and everyone who's trying to make it big here.
Yeah, so I think perhaps more general comment about technology. All these big problems that we face this century, think about climate change and also plastic pollution, they are sort of side effects of human technological development. We didn't intend to change the climate when we started hydrocarbon burning. We didn't intend to pollute the oceans when we invented plastics. They were actually invented as solutions.
Right.
So, I mean, the fact that we can actually, so first of all, the fact that we can change the systems at a global scale as just one single species, I think is incredible, and it just doesn't say that, it doesn't show technology is good or bad, it just shows that technology is extremely powerful. So powerful that even just the side effects of it are powerful enough to create, to change the freaking climate. I mean, that's a pretty big achievement in a way.
Yeah.
I think this century we don't have any other choice than to use that power of technology to also help solve these problems.
Sure.
And I think that's it's sort of a shame that in the environmental community there's a lot of negative bias towards technology because they do see it as the problem. But ironically, usually those blogs are written on a laptop or something. So So I think you can't really dismiss technologies. I think it's the only way to bring forward major change.
Sure. I'm going to just open up the floor to a question if we have a little bit of time. Anybody?
Maybe one question, so raise your hand and I'll bring you a mic.
Here, please.
You just mentioned that you don't use nets, but I thought you did. But has that changed? So what do you use then?
So what we use is our non-permeable screens. So they're almost like a curtain. I think that's all I would say about that right now, because on June 22nd we'll be unveiling the prototype and more details will be announced then. So sorry for the cliffhanger, yeah, we'll have some pretty cool solutions, I think, for the issues. Yeah.
Right on.
Do you
Great.
have,
So, I mean, we'll just do a quick one of just, if you could just let the audience know, what can people do, in their daily lives to prevent plastic pollution in the oceans?
Well, I think that so what we see is that in terms of sources, perhaps about 80% comes from land. So just preventing pollution from ending up in our waterways, I think is the most obvious thing. And other than that, I think really the emphasis should be on large-scale efforts, because if the fate of the ocean will really rely on the individual actions of 7.2 billion people, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night, I think. Sure. So I think, just this very basic thing, preventing plastic from ending up on the streets, etc. I think is the key thing. And other than that, we should just clean up what's already out there.
All right. We can do that.
Oh, and we're always hiring, so if there are any good engineers in here, just send us an email. That's also a good way to help, I think.
Great. That's all the time we have. The screen's red right here. So thank you guys so much. Thanks, Boyan.